the neat thing about the map,
I'll
right?
bring
I
it
mean,
back
there's two kind of different shaded areas there. One is the river system, right?
Yeah.
The watershed, as we call it, right? So, and I'll start there because improving the quality of life for people in this region didn't start with electricity, right? It started with the Tennessee River, right?
Okay.
This idea that you had this resource in an area of the country where people were very poor, where there was seasonal flooding that limited growth, right? Economic and industrial growth in places like Chattanooga. People were poor. I think I may have said that already. Agricultural practices essentially consisted of clear cutting and, hope, right? So the deforestation from the clear cutting, the seasonal rains and the flooding created all sorts of erosion. The river needed to be tamed, right? We needed some integrated resource plan for taming the river, reforesting large parts of the Tennessee Valley that had been clear cut, and improving agricultural practices, right? So you mentioned Muscle Shoals, you mentioned Wilson Dam, right?
Yeah.
Is where it all started, right? So the United States had already built Wilson Dam, or was building Wilson Dam to support the World War I effort. The dam had a couple of associated nitrate plants because you could use the nitrates to make munitions for World War I. Well, the dam wasn't completed before the war was over. So by the time the dam's completed, you've got a dam on the river that's going to improve, flooding and navigation right there in the shoals, generate some electricity to run these nitrate plants, but you don't need it for munitions anymore. Henry Ford apparently was interested in purchasing Wilson Dam for pennies on the dollar, right?
Oh, really?
What it cost I think, and I'll probably get these numbers wrong, U.S. government has spent $150 million building Wilson Dam. He wanted it for about $5 to build a Detroit of the South around this asset. Deal didn't go through, and instead, that became the first TVA asset. So Wilson Dam predated TVA, but when TVA was created, the headquarters were in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and Wilson Dam was its first and only asset, right? But that was kind of the anchor for this vision of an integrated resource plan. We've got this valuable resource. We can tame this river and manage it for flood control. We can manage it for navigation, improve the navigability of the river, manage it for recreation, right? Manage it for environmental stewardship, right? And the generation of electricity. So when power was initially generated at Wilson Dam and TVA wanted to sell the excess, right, beyond running the nitrate plants, which were then repurposed to make fertilizer, right, as part of this agricultural revolution that was going on all over the world, TVA wanted to sell the excess power from Wilson Dam, and the neighboring utilities, the utilities surrounded TVA, said no, right, we don't need the government in the electricity business. That case went actually all the way to the Supreme Court, arguing about whether TVA could sell what was effectively surplus government property. We've got excess electricity. The electricity is government property. We should be able to surplus it just like we surplus any other government property. TVA won that case. That created a legal foundation for then TVA to sell power to others, right? And I think in the early 1930s, Tupelo, Mississippi was the first town to receive TVA power and power its city. You're absolutely right, though, that most of the valley did not have electricity at the time. Around the same time TVA was created, the rural electrification effort started nationwide, right? So, and you saw the creation of a bunch of rural electric cooperatives. We've got 8 of those in North Alabama today. Joe Wheeler, EMC to the west of here, Sand Mountain Electric Cooperative to the east, and several others. Those types of rural electric cooperatives were created, member-owned cooperatives were created around that same time as well, because there was no money to be made electrifying rural America, right? There was electricity in the urban centers, kind of like the internet and fiber situation you described today or in recent years, right? There's money to be made where customers are dense and you can make an investment and recover your investment. There's less money to be made where the customers are spread out, right? And there's only one every mile or so.
Yeah.
So TVA was created along with this rural electrification effort to then, right, it had the ability to then electrify the valley,